Welcome, foolish mortals.
Welcome to Best Friends Nancy. A spooky podcast.
That'll work for an intro.
Were you
uh,
recording already?
yeah, just
Oh, yay. I love it. I'm so glad. Because I don't think I could have repeated it without laughing.
same, same. And it was more authentic that way. So you guys might be wondering why we're doing this again. It's because Hefs has the sickies.
I have the plague.
The plague.
But you know what they also might be confused about is why I look the way I look. Because they have not seen my hair.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you guys haven't seen her with her new hair. I did that. I did that.
We'll put up a picture
Of brand new
somewhere
somewhere.
where you can see it. And
Yes.
me not just out of the shower, sick, dying, you know.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But yeah, I'm so proud of myself for her hair. I totally forgot because I'm so used to it. I was just like, oh yeah. And she does, like, she might have gotten a false positive. We don't know.
We don't
Everything's.
know, because we think that I got sick from my niece, and she just got tested for strep, COVID, and the flu, and came back negative on all three.
Mm,
And she's had her symptoms way longer than I have. So, and she is like coming out of it, but because I tested positive yesterday, my sister kept her home from school, took her to get tested. But like my first one was negative, and then I took two yesterday morning because I didn't believe the first one. And then the
right.
second one was positive. It was out of a new pack. But now I'm like that's the worst thing. It's like, okay, well, what was it a false positive?
Right.
Was the negative right? Was the positive right? I don't know. So because of that, obviously for safety reasons, we are treating it as if I have COVID because the one of the tests said so. So
Yeah, and my doctor always said, like, even if it's a false positive, as long as you're having symptoms, you might as well treat it like you do.
right, exactly. Like you don't need to be around people when you're feeling like that anyway.
Yeah.
Like regardless of if you get a positive or a negative result, you still need to stay in and get yourself feeling better.
Yeah. Because, I mean, if that's one thing COVID has taught us, is that we need to
Gotta
treat
take
it
care of
better. Yeah. Um, so what we're doing today is Lily, you need to Lily! I don't know if you guys have ever seen Lily. This is Lily.
Probably not, 'cause she doesn't like to come out a lot, but this gives us the rare opportunity.
Yes, you guys have a rare Lily sighting. So, what we're doing today is I got a series of creepy pastas. I gathered all of my favorites. Do you read many creepypastas? I forget if you said you do.
Um, my favorite is Tales from the Gas Station.
Oh, that's
I
right.
am just kind of hooked on that one. I'm thinking about listening to it tomorrow and taking a nap because I
Yes.
used to listen to it to fall asleep, and that was just my favorite thing.
Can I tell you how that makes me feel so normal? Because earlier I was trying to get into like the feelings of this, like, ooh, we gotta get in the
Yeah.
spooky feeling, and I fell asleep to spooky stories. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I must not be normal.
It's like, is that psychotic? We don't really know. It's
It's like, well, So, have you ever heard of Mr. Widemouth?
I have not.
I haven't read it, just me, but I've heard it so many times. So this is called Mr. Widemouth. It came out in 2010, so it's kind of old. Let's say, who's it by? I don't even know. I guess that's kind of the point of creepypastas is you don't know who wrote them. So it's kind of like, is it true? Is it not true? Kind of thing.
Yeah. It adds to the mystery.
Yeah. So it starts with during my childhood, my family was like a drop of water in a vast river, never remaining in one location for long. We settled in Rhode Island when I was 8, and there we remained until I went to college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are rooted in Rhode Island, but there are fragments in the attic of my brain which belong to the various homes we had lived in when I was much younger. Most of these memories are unclear and pointless. Chasing after another boy in the backyard of a house in North Carolina, trying to build a raft to float on the creek behind the apartment we rented in Pennsylvania, and so on. But there is one set of memories which remains as clear as glass, as though they were just made yesterday. I often wonder whether these memories are simply lucid dreams produced by the long sickness I experienced that spring, but in my heart, I know that they are real. We were living in a house just outside the bustling
Metropolis.
in Maine, population 643. It was a large structure, especially for a family of three. There were a number of rooms that I didn't see in the 5 months we resided there. In some ways, it was a waste of space, but it was the only house on the market at the time, at least within an hour's commute of my father's place of work. Ugh. The day after my 6th birthday, attended by my parents alone. Oh, that's so sad. I came down with a fever. The doctor said I had mono, which meant no rough play or more fever for at least another 3 weeks. Ugh. It was horrible timing to be bedridden. We were in the process of packing our things to move to Pennsylvania, and most of my things were already packed away in boxes, leaving my room barren. My mother brought me ginger ale and books several times a day, and these served the function of being my primary form of entertainment for the next few weeks. Boredom always loomed just around the corner, waiting to rear its ugly head and compound my misery. I don't exactly recall how I met Mr. Widemouth. I think it was about a week after I was diagnosed with mono. My first memory of the small creature was asking him if he had a name. He told me to call him Mr. Widemouth because his mouth was large. In fact, everything about him was large in comparison to his body, his head, his eyes, his crooked ears, but his mouth was by far the largest. You look like a Furby, I said as he flipped through one of those books. Mr. Widemouth stopped, and he gave me a puzzled look. Furby? What's a Furby? He asked. I shrugged. You know, the toy, the little robot with the big ears. You can pet and feed them almost like a real pet. Oh, Mr. Widemouth resumed his activity. You don't need one of those. They aren't the same as having real friends. I remember Mr. Widemouth disappearing every time my mother stopped by to check in on me. I lay under your bed, he later explained. I don't want your parents to see me because I'm afraid they won't let us play anymore. We didn't do much during those first few days. Mr. Widemouth just looked at my books, fascinated by the stories and pictures they contained. The third or fourth morning after I met him, he greeted me with a large smile on his face. I have a new game we can play, he said. We have to wait until after your mother comes to check on you because she can't see us play it. It's a secret game. After my mother delivered more books and soda at the usual time, Mr. Widemouth slipped out from under the bed and tugged my hand. We have to go to the room at the end of this hallway, he said. I objected at first, as my parents had forbidden me to leave my bed without their permission, but Mr. Widemouth persisted until I gave in. The room in question had no furniture or wallpaper. Its only distinguished feature was a window opposite of the doorway. Mr. Widemouth darted across the room and gave the window a firm push, flinging it open. He then beckoned me over to look out at the ground below. We were on the second story of the house, but it was on a hill, and from this angle the drop was farther than 2 stories due to the incline. I like to play pretend up here, Mr. Widemouth explained. I pretend that there's a big, soft trampoline below this window, and I jump. If you pretend hard enough, you bounce back up like a feather. I want you to try. I was 5 years old with a fever, so only a hint of skepticism darted through my thoughts as I looked down and considered the possibility. It's a long drop, I said. But that's all part of the fun. It wouldn't be fun if it was only a short drop. If it were that way, you may as well just bounce on a real trampoline. I toyed with the idea, picturing myself falling through thin air only to bounce back to the window on something unseen by human eyes. But the realist in me prevailed. Maybe some other time, I said. I don't know if I have enough imagination. I could get hurt. Mr. Widemouth's face contorted into a snarl, but only for a moment. Anger gave way to disappointment. If you say so, he said. He spent the rest of the day under my bed, quiet as a mouse. The following
That's
morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived holding a small box. I want to teach you how to juggle, he said. Here are some things you can use to practice before I start giving you lessons. I looked in the box. It was full of knives. My parents will
I knew
kill
it.
me, I shouted, horrified
I
that
can't
Miss
even read it, but I knew it.
I shouted, horrified that Mr. Widemouth had brought knives into my room, objects that my parents would never allow me to touch. I'll be spanked and grounded for a year. Mr. Widemouth frowned. It's fun to juggle with these. I want you to try it. I pushed the box away. I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives aren't safe to just throw in the air. Mr. Widemouth's frown deepened into a scowl. He took the box of knives and slid under my bed, remaining there for the rest of the day. I began to wonder how often he was under me. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Mr. Widemouth often woke me up in the middle of the night, saying he put a real trampoline under the window, a big one that I couldn't see in the dark. I always declined and tried to go back to sleep, but Mr. Widemouth persisted. Sometimes he stayed by my side until early morning, encouraging me to jump. He wasn't so fun to play with anymore. My mother came to me one morning and told me I had her permission to walk around outside. She thought the fresh air would be good for me, especially after being confined to my room for so long. Ecstatic, I put on my sneakers and trotted out to the back porch, yearning for the feeling of sun on my face. Mr. Widemouth was waiting for me. I have something I want you to see, he said. I must have given him a weird look because he then said, It's safe, I promise. I followed him to the beginning of a deer trail which ran through the woods behind the house. This is an important path, he explained. I've had a lot of friends about your age. When they were ready, I took them down this path to a special place. You aren't ready yet, but one day I hope to take you there. I returned to the house, wondering what kind of place lay beyond that trail. 2 weeks after I met Mr. Widemouth, the last load of our things had been packed into a moving truck. I would be in the cab of that truck, sitting next to my father for the long drive to Pennsylvania. I considered telling Mr. Widemouth that I would be leaving, but even at 5 years old, I was beginning to suspect that perhaps the creature's intentions were not to my benefit, despite what he said otherwise. For this reason, I decided to keep my departure a secret. My father and I were in the truck at 4 a.m. He was hoping to make it to Pennsylvania by lunchtime tomorrow with the help of the endless supply of coffee and a six-pack of energy drinks. He seemed more like a man who was about to run a marathon rather than the one who was about to spend 2 days sitting still. Early enough for you? He asked. I nodded and placed my head against the window, hoping for some sleep before the sun came up. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. This is the last move, son, I promise. I know it's hard for you, as sick as you've been. Once Daddy gets promoted, we can settle down and you can make friends. I opened my eyes as we backed out of the driveway. I saw Mr. Widemouth's silhouette in my bedroom window. He stood motionless until the truck was about to turn onto the main road. He gave a pitiful little wave goodbye, steak knife in hand. I didn't wave back. Years later, I returned to the new vineyard. The piece of land our house stood upon was empty, except for the foundation, as the house burned down a few years after my family left. Out of curiosity, I followed the deer trail that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me expected him to jump out from behind a tree and scare the living bejesus out of me, but I felt that Mr. Widemouth was gone, somehow tied to the house that no longer existed. The trail ended at the New Vineyard Memorial Cemetery. I noticed that most of the tombstones belonged to children. Oh, I just got chills. Again, after I know what the story is.
Oh,
Ugh, that still gives me chills.
that's terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Ugh. I mean, that's really. I didn't have any pretend friends, did you?
No.
Yeah.
My imaginary friend that I pretended to play with was I pretended that I was playing with Dora, which was a real character from TV.
Yeah.
But I just pretended that I was playing with her in real life. I never made up any characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I didn't really have any imaginary friends either. I tried, but I just got bored.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then I also had y'all and my little brother, so I wasn't lonely.
yeah,
So, this next one is called Candle Cove. Have you ever heard this one?
I have not.
Okay, this one is kind of like lost episode of a television show. Have you ever heard of that? Because it's similar one that like SpongeBob. It's like rumor that
Yeah,
there's a missing episode of
yeah,
SpongeBob that's like creepy. I've read that one too. This one's kind of like that though. And people are trying to
yeah.
remember it. Kind of like if you, we were talking about this with my family. What's it called when everybody remembers a certain thing?
The Mandela effect.
Yes, this reminds me of the
Oh my
Mandela
gosh,
effect
I
in the
can go
beginning.
down rabbit holes on end
So
over
can
that stuff.
I. We need to go down that one day. Maybe we'll deep dive into that. I love the Mandela effect.
Yes,
It's so
yes,
creepy. So Candle Cove was on here in 2009, so another old one. Oldie but goodie. Goodie, apparently. This one is kind of like a chat room kind of thing.
yeah,
So, it starts off on a net nostalgia forum, television local. Skies Shale, I guess, or Skies Hail 033. And the subject is Candle Cove Local Kid Show. Does anyone remember this kid show? It was called Candle Cove, and I must have been like 6 or 7. I never found reference to it anywhere, so I think it was a local station around 1971 or 1972. I lived in Ironton at the time. I don't remember which station, but I do remember it was on at weird time, like 4 p.m. Mike Painter 65, he replied saying, "It seems really familiar to me. I grew up outside of Ashland and I was 9 years old in 72. Candle Cove. Was it about pirates? I remember a pirate marionette at the mouth of a cave talking to a little girl." Skies Hale replied, saying, "Yes! Okay, I'm not crazy. I remember Pirate Percy. I was always kind of scared of him. He looked like he was built from parts of other dolls. Real low budget. His head was an old porcelain baby doll, looked like an antique that didn't belong on the body. I don't remember what station this was. I don't think it was WTSF though." Anyway, so Jared 2005 says, "Sorry to resurrect this old thread, but I know exactly what show you mean. Skies sale or whatever. I think Candle Cove ran for only a couple months in 71, not 72. I was 12 and I watched it a few times with my brother. It was channel 58, whatever station that was. My mom would let me switch to it after the news. Let me see what I remember. It took place in Candle Cove, and it was about a little girl who imagined herself to be friends with pirates. The pirate ship was called the Laughing Stock, and Pirate Percy wasn't a very good pirate because he got scared too easily. There was calliope music constantly playing. Don't remember this girl's name, Janice or Jade or something. Think it was Janice. Sky Hale said, "Thank you, Jaren. Memories flooded back when you mentioned the laughing stock in Channel 58. I remember the bow of the ship was a wooden smiling face with the lower jaw submerged. It looked like it was swallowing the sea, and it had the awful Ed Wynn voice and laughed. Ugh. I especially remember how jarring it was when they switched it from the wooden plastic model to the foam puppet version of the head that talked. What the heck? Mike
What?
Painter said, haha, I remember now too. Do you remember this part, Skyhale? You have to go inside. Ugh, Mike, I got a chill reading that. Yes, I remember. That's what the ship always told Percy when there was a spooky place he had to go in, like a cave or a dark room where the treasure was. And the camera would push in on Laughingstock's face with each pause. You have to go inside. With his two eyes askew and the flopping foam jaw and the fishing line that opened and closed it. Ugh, it was just like so cheap and awful. You guys remember the villain? He had a face that was just a handlebar mustache above really tall, narrow teeth. Kevin Hart says, I honestly thought the villain was Private Percy. I was about 5 when the show was on. Nightmare fuel. Jaren 2005 said that wasn't the villain. The puppet with the mustache. That was the villain's sidekick. Horace Horrible. He had a monocle too, and it was on top of the mustache. I used to think that it meant to be only one eye. But yeah, the villain was another marionette, the skin taker. I can't believe that they used to let us watch back then. Kevin Hart replied, the Skin Taker? What kind of a kids show were we watching? I seriously could not look at the screen when the Skin Taker showed up. He just descended out of nowhere on his strings, just a dirty skeleton wearing that brown top hat and cape, and his glass eyes that were too big for his skull. Skyhill said, wasn't his top hat and cloak all sewn up crazily? Was that supposed to be child skin? Mike Painter, yeah, I think so. Remember his mouth didn't open and close? His jaw just slid back and forth? I remember the little girl said, why does your mouth move like that? And the skin taker didn't look at the girl, but at the camera and said, to grind your skin. Ugh. I'm so
Ugh.
I know. I'm so relieved that other people remember this terrible show. I used to have this awful memory, a bad dream I had where the opening jingle ended and the show faded in from black and all the characters were there. But the camera was just cutting to each of their faces and they were just screaming and the puppets and the marionettes were flailing spastically and just all screaming. The girl was just moaning and crying like she had been through hours of this. I woke up many times from that nightmare. I used to wet the bed when I had it. Kevin Hart, I don't think that was a dream. I remember that. I remember that episode. Sky said, no, 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 that not possible. There was no plot or anything. I mean, literally just standing in place, crying and screaming for the whole show. Kevin said, maybe I'm manufacturing the memory because you said that, but I swear to God I remember seeing what you described. They just screamed. Jaren, oh God, yes. The little girl, Janice. I remember seeing her shake and the skin taker screaming through his gnashing teeth, his jaw careening so wildly I thought it would come off its wire hinges. I turned it off and it was the last time I watched. I ran to tell my brother and he didn't have the courage to turn it back on. Yeah, me either. Mike Painter.
Ugh.
I visited my mom today at the nursing home. I asked her about when I was little in the early 70s, when I was 8 or 9, and if she remembered the kids' show Candle Cove. She said she was surprised I could remember that, and I asked why. She said, because I used to think it was so strange that you said, I'm gonna go watch Candle Cove now, Mom, and then you would just tune the TV to static and just watch dead air for 30 minutes and had a big imagination with your little pirate show. Oh my god. Oh my god. Whole body chills. Oh my god.
No.
Oh my god.
Oh my
I'm
God.
gonna throw up.
That's terrifying.
Oh my god. The way when I went to read that last sentence, I'm like, no.
No.
Oh,
Not the TV static.
not the
At
TV
first, I was
static.
like, oh my God, it wasn't a dream. That was an episode, and multiple people remember this. And then TV static?
Oh my
No.
gosh.
Oh my God, that's
So
insane.
creepy. I just watched Markiplier's new Amazon show he just put out. Because you like Markiplier, right? You used
I
to
mean, I
watch
never
him.
really watched him. I watched him a little bit, but I watched him with you, or
Yeah.
you'd be like, "Hey, you should watch the new Markiplier video," and I'd watch it. Like, I would only
Yeah.
watch it if you'd tell me to watch it. I'd be like, "Okay."
Yeah. Sounds like
I
me.
would like it was one of those things where
The
like
edge
I
of
was just
sleep.
never a YouTube girl.
Oh, I'm such a YouTube girl. It's so bad. This one is actually really, really good. It's a psychological horror kind of.
Ooh.
It's called The Edge of Sleep, and it's basically about this guy named Dave, and he's had really bad night terrors for all of his life. And it's like people, you cannot go to sleep because you die in your sleep.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's creepy. It's really cool. You should watch it. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
And he's such a good actor, but I've been a follower of his, gosh, and since forever. Jeez, I can't even think,
Yeah.
like 2010, 11. I don't remember when he started. You know about the Russian sleep experiment, yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I'm excited because I haven't really read this one in a while. So, this one came out in 2012. It's another psychological horror.
Ignore my slouchiness. I've got like a weird nerve pain going on in my back right now. We're just kind of rolling with it.
Okay.
I just have to lean weird and then it goes away.
Right. Um, is this real? Do you know if it's real? I don't think it's
I've
real.
I've read that there is a real Russian sleep experiment. I've read that the creepypasta
Exaggerates
could
it
be different,
probably.
but I've also heard that there's certain things that weren't released, so the creepypasta is almost like filling in the gaps of what we don't know.
Hmm. So, the Russian sleep experiment. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake 15 days using an experimental gas based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed
Oh,
environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them. Since it was toxic in high concentrations, there was 4 closed circuit cameras. So they had only microphones and 5-inch thick glass porthole sized windows into the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to sleep on, but no bedding, running water and toilet, and enough dried food to last all 5 for a month. The test subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised falsely that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past, and the general tone of their conversations took on a darker aspect after the 4-day mark. So you're telling me they trauma dumped. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Me too, though.
As you do.
Yeah. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternatively whispering to the microphones in one-way mirrored portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think that they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected that this was an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber repeatedly, yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about his behavior is how the other captives reacted to it, or rather didn't react to it. They continued whispering to the microphones until the second of the captives started to scream. The two non-screaming captives took the books apart, smearing page after page with their own feces, and pasted them calmly over the glass portholes. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering to the microphones. After 3 more days passed, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure that they were working, since they thought it impossible that no sound could be coming with 5 people inside. The oxygen
Yeah.
consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 must still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at a very heavy level of strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something that they said they would not do to get a reaction from the captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any response from the captives they were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom." To their surprise, they heard a single phrase in a calm voice response: "We no longer want to be freed." Debate broke out among the researchers and the military forces funding the research. Unable to provoke any more response using the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for the life of loved ones, to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened and soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state of any of them life. The food rations past day 5 had not been so much as touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subjects' thighs and chests stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All four surviving test subjects, surviving in quotation marks, also had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth, as the researchers initially thought. Closer examination of the position and angles of the wounds indicated that most, if not all of them, were self-inflicted. Oh my gosh. The abdominal organs below the rib cage of all four test subjects had been removed. What in the world?
Ugh.
While the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remained in place. The skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs through the rib cage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had just been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the eviscerated
Yeah.
but still living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tract of all four could be seen working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that had been ripped off and eaten over the course of days.
Oh.
Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at the facility, but still many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber and alternatively begged and demanded that the gas be turned back on lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put on a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out. Another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and an artery of his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives if you count ones that committed suicide in the weeks following the incident. Ugh. In the struggle, one of the 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured and he bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of morphine derivative and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arm of one doctor. When heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out to the point there was no more air in his vesicular system than blood. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach, and just repeating the word more over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility, the 2 with intact vocal cords continuously begging for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room that the facility had. In the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back within his body, it was found that he was effectively immune to the sedation that was given to him to prepare him for the surgery. He fought furiously against his restraints when the anesthetic gas was brought to him to put him under. He managed to tear most of his way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on his wrist, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier was holding that wrist as well. It took only a little more anesthetic than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy of the test subject that died on the operating table, it was found that his blood had triple the normal amount of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn. He had broken 9 bones in his struggle to not be subdued. Most of them were from the force of his own muscles had exerted on them. He's so pissed. The second survivor had been the first of the group of 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed, he was unable to beg or object to surgery, and he only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested reluctantly they try the surgery without anesthetic, and did not react for the entire 6-hour procedure of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The surgeon presiding stated repeatedly that it should be medically possible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this must be something of drastic importance, the surgeon had a pen and pad fetched so the patient could write his message. It was simple: keep cutting. I'll throw up. The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well. Although they had to be injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation, the surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subjects could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short period of time, and they were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given: I must remain awake. All 3 subjects' restraints were reinforced, and they were placed back into the chamber, awakened determination as to what should be done with them. The researchers faced the wrath of their military benefactors for having failed the stated goals of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, a former KGB agent, instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if they were put back on the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled.
Ugh.
In preparation for being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all 3 stopped struggling the moment it was let slip that they were going back on the gas. It was
Ugh.
obvious that at this point all 3 were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bonds with all of his might, first left, then right, then left again, for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired to the EEG, most of the researchers were monitoring his brain waves in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes flatlined inexplicably. It looked as if he repeatedly, ow, Lily, suffering from brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper scrolling out of the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut at the same moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwaves immediately changed to that of deep sleep, then flatlined for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped.
Oh, God.
Jeez, oh Pete's. The only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brain waves showed the same flat lines as one who just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber with both subjects inside, as well as three researchers. Whew. One of
Whoa.
one of the named three immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed the gun at the remaining subjects, still restrained to the bed, as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. I won't be locked in here with these things. Not with you, he screamed at the man strapped to the table. What are you? He demanded. I must know. The subject smiled. Have you forgotten so easily? The subject asked. We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in the deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread. The researcher paused, then aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out, so nearly free. Whew. And that's the end. Um,
Genuinely, I do not blame that guy. I've
Me either.
probably done the same thing. That, no, that's
Yeah.
terrifying. You're not doing that to me. No, I'm good.
So
I like to sleep.
there's this picture right here of people in like
Yeah.
masks, and it says appearance
Yeah,
and
it was a real
origins.
thing.
Yeah. There are a number of images associated with the Russian sleep experiment, and the story is of an event rather than about an individual or character. There is one image that is most well known and commonly linked to the story, in which most fans will instantly recognize. Yeah, maybe. The image shows a humanoid creature staring blankly into the camera. Yeah. The figure is horribly emaciated, a fact that is further emphasized by the extent to which the eyes are sunken back into the sockets, the brow and cheekbones protruding in an unnatural extent. Yeah. The teeth, meanwhile, are an unusually large size and forced forward by the thinness of the subject into a maniacal looking grin. The subject's hugely exaggerated features, enlarged head, and huddled posture first, with the concept of them being as much as a victim as a threat. The image is in black and white, which some authenticity considered the period in which it is alleged to be taken. Yeah. Thankfully, the image is fake, and rather than being a human being, it is in fact a photograph of a Halloween prop named Spasm, created in 2005 by Morbid Enterprises.
Yeah,
Yeah. So basically, it's just taking apart all this stuff and where it came from. Oh my goodness. Influence and buried fears. Why this is so. Whatever real life influences. My goodness. I was home. I live alone, but there's a woman sitting on my couch.
that's creepy.
Okay. Let's see what this one's about. It was posted in 2021. Kind of recent. I
Yeah.
live alone in a one-bedroom apartment. So can anyone tell me why there's a woman sitting on my couch watching TV? I was in my room getting some work done when I had gotten a bit hungry, and planned on walking to the kitchen to get some leftover Chinese food. My kitchen sits next to the living room, and as soon as I stepped into the dark hallway, I noticed the television was on. I know I never stopped to watch anything on it, so this was an immediate red flag. Thinking that maybe it was updating or maybe Alexa had switched it on by mistake, I walked over to turn it off. but my heart dropped when I saw a woman with oily black hair sitting on my couch watching it. For a moment, I was confused because I knew there was no one here when I walked in, and I knew all the doors and windows were locked. From the time I came home, I hadn't heard anyone break in. So, how the heck could a person be sitting there? After the confusion passed, I wanted to walk forward and ask what the heck she was doing in my house,
Yeah.
but something screamed that it would be a grave mistake. If anyone has ever experienced sleep paralysis, that's what the feeling was like. I told my body to move, but the primal part of my brain refused vehemently. I slowly crept back into my room and just waited in silence. At this point, I know you're already screaming at me to call the cops, and trust me, I wanted to. Nothing at that moment would have made me feel better than to have one or two armed police officers there to deal with her so that I didn't have to. But if I'm being honest, I didn't want her to hear me talking. If she had walked to my room, I'd be trapped, and at that moment I felt like I'd be in a nightmare. After waiting for half an hour in silence, I mustered up enough courage to at least observe and see what she was up to. Forcing myself up, I cracked the door open just enough to get a clear view of the hallway and look at where she was sitting. If I didn't know any better, I'd have thought she had legitimately just stumbled into the wrong house and was relaxing like any normal person. But something was off. It almost looked as if she was slumped forward on the couch. Part of me wanted to believe she was sleeping, but what I saw next shattered all hope of that. She reached a disgustingly long arm towards the door and unlocked it from her seated position with ease. I haven't measured yet, but the eyeballing the distance from my couch to the door, it had to be at least 8 or 9 feet away from the on the low end. What do you mean? I slowly stood
Is
up.
this like Girl?
I don't know.
Like, what is happening?
I don't know. She slowly stood up and made a clumsy effort to walk towards it. Her body was horrifying. She was tall, uncomfortably so. And if I had to guess, I'd say she was maybe over 9 feet with arms that touched the ground and dragged behind her. Her hands each sported roughly 11 fingers that had to each be around a foot in length. From what I remember, she was completely naked with sagging skin that hung loosely off extremely thin body. She was also paler than what I thought possible. Her skin appeared almost gray, and if I didn't know any better, I'd think her skin belonged to that of someone recently deceased. Hey, excuse me.
Yes.
She didn't move gracefully. She dragged her massive body towards the door and raised her long arm towards the doorknob to pull it open. It almost looked like she had to break her own bones to complete the movement. But as she
Ugh.
pulled the door open and moved a spindly leg outside, she stopped. My blood ran cold as she slowly turned her head towards me, and I caught a glimpse of her face. I wanted to scream, but I didn't see any eyes. Just a puffy
Ugh.
exterior with sagging eye holes and a mouth with long rubbery lips that drooped past her shoulders and a permanent look of anguish.
Ugh.
I didn't know if she saw me or if she even had the capability to. All I remember was her turning her head back outside and leaving my home. She shut the door behind her, and I was left in silence with my heart pumping faster than it ever did. I rushed outside with my phone to see if I could catch her on video. And I wish I hadn't. I wish I had just closed the door and gone to sleep or gotten drunk and tried to pass the whole thing off as an effed up nightmare. But what I saw was, I know it was real. I looked outside in the cold dark and I saw her hanging off the side of a building like a effing spider. The window of the person above me was open. She was fishing inside, and after a few seconds of searching, she pulled out their son. Her hand was completely wrapped around the head, and I couldn't tell if they were alive or dead by the time she slinked off into the darkness with the young boy. I caught it all on video. I must have watched the video 100 times before deleting it. Deleted it! I mean, what the F was I supposed to do with it? Do you think the police would have believed it was real piece of evidence? Even if they did, what the heck would they do? And as a parent, you are you better off thinking that your kid ran away or knowing that it was taken by an entity that can't even begin to that we can't even begin to comprehend?
Yeah. What?
At least with the former, you can have hope that maybe you'll see them again. I just couldn't bring myself to bring up such a crazy notion to a grieving family, or worse, have them believe me and go looking for something that no one should ever try and find. I knew as long as I kept it, I'd be tempted to watch it, and every time I watched it, I'd be driven further into madness. There have been more stories of kids missing as of late. I've even heard some rumors about pets going missing from people's homes. Surprisingly enough, I even heard a story about a full-grown man disappearing. He was never seen again with absolutely no trace of where he went or why he left. The only thing suggesting any kind of outside force was an open window, with a few strands of hair police couldn't match to any DNA. This has taken quite a toll on my life. I tried to find info on this thing, but as far as I know, there's nothing. If anyone out there had a similar experience, please tell me your story or share images of the thing you have taken. I just want to know I'm not crazy. I'm quitting my job tomorrow and staying with my brother on the other side of the country. There's no way I'm sticking around that thing more than I need to. I don't
Gotta
plan on being
get out of
here.
Dodge.
Yeah, I don't plan on being here much longer, but last night I heard knocking at my door. I know the next time I see it, I won't be telling a story afterward. But I also know I'm burning this whole apartment down with me. Oh my god. That's one of my fears is when I'm home alone, I'm going to see something and I'm going to die.
Yep.
Like that is one of my worst fears is that yeah, no way. No, no, no. And hearing knocking or like a weird noise when you're home alone, no.
Nope. Yes. Not for me. I'm good.
Yeah, because remember that one time you were home alone and you called me? And you're like, I don't want
Yes.
to. Yeah, I
I thought
can't
I
do
was
it.
gonna die.
Yeah. So
Ugh.
stinking creepy. All of those were so good.
Yes.
I hope you guys liked it and that you were like crazy freaked out for Halloween.
Yes.
Happy Halloween, everybody. Um,
Definitely check out our Instagram. We're gonna have to post pictures since we'll be together on Halloween.
yeah, yeah, and you
So
guys will see our costumes.
costumes.
Yeah,
You'll see why my hair is this color.
right. Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment.
And tell your friends. And come back next time for more nonsense.
Yeah, all right.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.